CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Jamie Owen. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories. Hundreds of people feared dead after a fishing trawler filled with migrants sinks off the coast of Greece. Our other headlines. Russian nuclear weapons begin arriving in Belarus. Moscow says it'll retain full control over them. China and Palestine announce a strategic partnership. President Xi Jinping meets the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in Beijing. And Italy marks a day of national mourning as the funeral of the former Premier Silvio Berlusconi takes place in Milan's cathedral. Hundreds of people are unaccounted for after a fishing boat carrying migrants capsized off the coast of Greece. At least 59 people drowned and more than 100 others were rescued. It is still unclear exactly how many passengers were on board. Well, the Greek Coast Guard said the boat was making for Italy when it was spotted around 80 kilometers southwest of the town of Pylos. It sank a few hours later after reportedly refusing assistance from the Greek authorities. Well, let's talk to our correspondent Evangelo Sipsas in the nearby town of Kalamata, where survivors have been taken. Evangelo, what more do you know?
Well, so far what we know is that 78 people have lost their lives and about 104 have been rescued off the coast of Pylos, as you mentioned, and they were brought here in the port city of Kalamata, where right behind me there's a makeshift trauma center set up for those who are being rescued so they can be treated perhaps from injuries or any other trauma that they might be going through. But as you also mentioned, there's a number of people that are still missing at sea. Now, the Italian Coast Guard is saying that on that boat there were about 700 people, when the Hellenic Coast Guard is saying that about 400 to 450 were on the boat. So we don't know exactly what the number is, but what we do know is that there's still people missing at sea. Now, there's been all the hospitals in the area are on red alert, ready to accept anyone who might be rescued. Nearby cities have sent a number of ambulances, a number of personnel to support with any traumas or any injuries. The Hellenic Ministry of Migration is also on the ground here with the help of the Coast Guard to assist those who have been rescued, because a lot of them don't speak English or the language here in Greek. They were traveling from Libya to Italy, and a lot of them, unfortunately, don't speak the language, so it's very difficult to understand what happened, where are we going, and what the number of those on that ship were.
The numbers of deaths clearly terrible. The sense of shock must be palpable. What political reaction has there been?
Well, unfortunately, the number could be rising as we're speaking right now because the operation is still ongoing, but there has been a lot of political reaction. The president of Greece, Katerina Sakelloropoulou, just moments ago was here visiting this makeshift trauma center to see and supervise the operation herself. Now, the Greek Prime Minister, the actually leader of the New Democracy Party, Kyriakos Mitsotakis, did cancel his speech in the nearby city of Patra, as we have to mention here that we are still going through an election campaign period, as there is national elections on June 25th. Alexis Tsipras, the leader of the left-wing Syriza party, also canceled his speech in the island of Crete, and the PASOK party with the leader Androulakis is going to be arriving on the scene here at any moment to assist and see himself what is going on. There's been a lot of messages online. A lot of politicians, a lot of MPs, a lot of foreign politicians, European MPs also have been sending their condolences and their support to the Greek government here. But as we see, the time is going to be going by. More and more politicians will be arriving here to see themselves what is going on, and perhaps give a speech of how they feel and what the next day might look like.
Evangelo, thank you for that. Our correspondent Evangelo Sipsas in Kalamata in Greece. Well, this latest migrant boat tragedy comes as conflicts and emergencies around the world push the total number of displaced people to a new record high in 2022. 108 million people were forcibly displaced, largely as a result of persecution or conflict, according to the United Nations. That's a rise of 19 million people on the previous year. Around a third of that number are people who've crossed international borders to try to find safety. The conflict in Ukraine pushed 11 million people to seek shelter either internally or in another country, the fastest and largest movement of people since the Second World War. And more have been added to that 2022 total, with the recent conflict in Sudan forcing close to 2 million people to flee their homes. Well, let's talk now to Olga Sarrado, the global spokesperson for the United Nations Refugee Agency, the UNHCR. Olga, welcome. Good to see you. Have we learned no lessons from past refugee crises? This seems to be simply repeated decade after decade after decade.
That's it. So once more, 1 year more, and this has been the trend for the past 10 years, we see another record number, 110 million people forcibly displaced worldwide. That is 110 million lives shattered. This is 1 in 74 people in the world that have been forced to leave their homes, seeking safety and just to save their lives. As you were mentioning, there are conflicts that are lasting longer, like the one in Ukraine, for instance, but we are also seeing new conflicts arising, like the one in Sudan, but also the impact of climate change that is mixing as well with persistent conflict that is driving people out from their homes.
National governments just kick the can down the road, though, don't we? I mean, just this week we see the EU paying Tunisia to deal with money for migrants. The UK, of course, trying to offshore its problem to Rwanda. Where is the global solution?
We see with concern some of these practices of externalizing the obligation that the countries have to protect those people that are fleeing wars and conflict and persecution. Also returns, pushbacks that are forcing people to take dangerous journeys to reach safety. We are seeing this with strong concern, but the solution is not there. The solution is in the root causes that are driving people out from their homes. Conflicts must end. Efforts must be made to find peace in these countries, so people don't have to take the decision to move. One of the evidences that our data is showing today in the report is that 70% of the people of refugees that are forced to flee their countries stay in neighboring countries. This is because the only thing they want is to return home as soon as there is peace. So we need to work on that, on the root causes of these conflicts, so people don't have to flee for their lives.
To be blunt, what is the United Nations doing to ease this refugee crisis? I mean, are you simply an organisation that is now reactive rather than proactive?
We are at the moment providing across the world with emergency humanitarian aid to those people that are forced to flee crossing the border, and that they arrive most of the time with almost nothing. But that's just a very quick solution. At the same time, we are working hand in hand with governments to make the asylum systems fair, more efficient, so people can quickly reach this protection and the safety that they are looking for, but also looking at solutions in the long term, also with the private sector and other partners. So those refugees that have to leave their homes can find stability, and they can live in dignity in the countries where they sought safety until they can come back, and they can also contribute to those communities that are welcoming them.
Olga, thank you very much for joining us. Olga Sarrado from the United Nations Refugee Agency, the UNHCR. Belarus has begun receiving tactical nuclear weapons from Russia after an agreement for warheads to be stationed in the country. President Alexander Lukashenko confirmed the delivery on Russian state television. He said some were 3 times more powerful than the bombs dropped by the United States on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. This is the first time Moscow has moved such weapons outside Russia since the fall of the Soviet Union. Well, our correspondent Dasha Chernyshova is in Moscow. Dasha, what else did Belarus's president have to say?
Well, indeed, the president of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, said that his country has started taking those deliveries of tactical nuclear weapons to Belarus from Russia. We understand that these will be happening in the next several days, according to Lukashenko. He also stressed that those weapons will be deployed in different parts of the country. They won't be held at one storage. There are many facilities, and he also has hinted that there are facilities on his soil to station even longer-range missiles if needed as well. We also understand that the storage facilities will be guarded by the Russian soldiers, and Lukashenko has stressed that that was not Moscow's idea to deploy those weapons on the territory of Belarus, but that was the demand that has been coming from him from Minsk. He also has stressed that his country had no plans to join Russia's so-called special military operation, but if there was an aggression against Belarus, then Minsk would not hesitate to join those activities.
Has Moscow said anything about Ukraine's counteroffensive?
Well, indeed, we have once again heard from Russia's Ministry of Defense saying that the Russian outposts have been able to successfully repel the attacks of the Ukrainian offensive happening on three fronts: in the southern Donetsk direction, in the Zaporizhia direction, and on Donetsk direction. Now, Moscow insists that the Ukrainian counteroffensive has been underway as of the 4th of June, and the Russian president has said that that offensive was largely unsuccessful. He said the Ukrainian armed forces have been suffering significant losses, both in terms of the manpower as well as the military equipment. So the estimate, according to the Russian president, is that up to 30% of the arms supplied by the Western countries to Ukraine have been already destroyed by the Russian military. He also said that the manpower losses of Ukraine have been 10 times more significant than those of Russia. And we have heard from the Russian Ministry of Defense today saying that as of the 4th of June, the day when Moscow believes the offensive has started, Ukraine has lost, killed and wounded over 75,000 men. We also understand that Russia has been carrying out strikes with the high-precision weapons, eliminating the storage facilities where the arms supplied from the West have been kept, also the command posts and the military infrastructure of Ukraine. And also a very important comment has been coming from the Kremlin, saying that Moscow might consider the creation of the so-called sanitary zone on the territory of Ukraine. The Kremlin has explained that the West is supplying longer-range weapons to Ukraine, and that's why Moscow needs to make sure that the military infrastructure of Ukraine is moved further from the Russian border so that the territories such as Belgorod, Kursk and Bryansk are not in peril.
Dasha, thank you for that. Our correspondent Dasha Chernyshova with The View from Moscow. Well, at least 6 people have reportedly been killed and more than a dozen injured in Ukraine following Russian missile strikes on Odessa and Donetsk. The Ukrainian military spokesperson said its air force destroyed 3 Russian missiles and 9 drones during the overnight strikes. Russia has denied targeting civilians in their military operations. The former United States President Donald Trump says he's the victim of an evil abuse of power after he pleaded not guilty to federal charges. Trump appeared in a court in Miami on 37 counts relating to the storing of top-secret documents at his home. He's accused of lying to officials who tried to recover the documents, some of which contain details of nuclear and defense capabilities of both the United States and other countries. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent Benji Hire in Miami. Benji, this was an incendiary speech. What else did Donald Trump have to say altogether?
Yeah, Donald Trump striking a defiant tone on Tuesday night, telling his supporters that their opponents will fail bigger and better than ever before, and vowing not to back down against what he calls vicious political persecution.
This is called election interference and yet another attempt to rig and steal a presidential election. More importantly, it's a political persecution like something straight out of a fascist or a communist nation.
On what he called a day of infamy, Mr. Trump had earlier pleaded not guilty to several potential felonies. He stands accused by the Department of Justice of retaining classified documents that he took from the White House and then obstructing justice by failing to reveal that to investigators. This, remarkably, is not the first time that Donald Trump has been indicted this past year alone. He remains the center of several other investigations, and yet many of his faithful continue to stand loyally by the first former US president to face federal charges. Outside the court, and both inside, I guess there was a jarring dichotomy, a contrast between a subdued atmosphere within the courtroom and fury and frenzy on the exterior, where pro-Trump crowds swarmed the area around the building and the media tents, lambasting what they saw as a hoax, a witch hunt, an attempt to bring down their favored presidential candidate in the courts rather than at the ballot box. Inside the courtroom, Donald Trump was fingerprinted, he was booked, his lawyer put forward that not guilty plea, and then really that was that. The proceedings over in a couple of minutes, and Donald Trump was on his way.
Benji, just talk us through the timetable and the choreography now. I mean, what happens next in this case?
I think the way to answer that, actually, is to look exactly what happened once he left the courtroom yesterday afternoon, and that is that we didn't hear anything about a trial date, a jury. Rather, Donald Trump stopped by a Cuban restaurant for some handshakes in Miami before flying to New Jersey for that fundraising event and that speech that you mentioned, where he claimed the charges were fake and fabricated, an evil, heinous abuse of power, he said. This ultimately a demonstration that his campaign remains in full swing. He has promised not to step down from the campaign, even if convicted, and he is trying to use this to his benefit in the same way he surged in the polls following a previous arraignment a few months ago in New York. It's really indicative of Trump, and we will eventually see this play out in a trial, of course, although we don't know when that will be. Prosecutors are pushing for a speedy one before the 2024 presidential election, when Donald Trump may well be the Republican candidate. And if that happens, then this could well be decided in the court of public opinion at a time when Donald Trump's supporters are trying to sow the seeds of doubt in America's electoral process.
Benji, thank you for that. Our correspondent Benji Hire in Miami. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, China says it'll aim to facilitate peace talks in the Middle East. The Palestinian president meets Xi Jinping.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
There's a new agenda for a new world, accelerating change in almost every part of our lives. It's shifting the norms of how we work, travel, and connect. How we think, interact, and develop. It's a new reality, a new agenda with me, Juliet Mann.
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. Hundreds of people feared dead after a fishing trawler filled with migrants sinks off the coast of Greece. Our other headlines: Russian nuclear weapons begin arriving in Belarus. Moscow says it'll retain full control over them. China and Palestine have announced a strategic partnership. President Xi Jinping has been meeting the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in Beijing, with China aiming to help facilitate new Middle East peace talks with Israel. Our correspondent Fung Yi Lei reports.
During the meeting between two leaders, Chinese President Xi Jinping highlighted the significance of President Abbas being the first Arab head of state to be received by China this year, emphasizing that this visit signifies the strength of China-Palestine relations. And today, the two presidents have jointly announced the establishment of a strategic partnership between the two countries. And this is seen as a landmark development that is built upon past achievements and also paves the way for a promising future in bilateral relations. And China will seize this opportunity to work with Palestine to advance bilateral friendship and also cooperation in many areas. And today, in light of the world's unprecedented changes as well as new developments in the Middle East, President Xi reiterated that China stands ready to enhance coordination and cooperation with Palestine, working towards achieving a comprehensive, equitable and enduring resolution to the Palestinian question. And also, President Xi put forward three key propositions. Firstly, he said the fundamental solution to the Palestinian issue lies in the establishment of an independent Palestinian state with full sovereignty, with East Jerusalem as its capital based on the 1967 borders. And secondly, the economic and livelihood needs of the Palestinian people should be safeguarded, and the international community should increase assistance and humanitarian support for Palestine's development. And thirdly, it is necessary to uphold the correct direction of negotiations, and efforts include abandoning extremism and provocative actions, and also promoting the convening of a larger scale and more authoritative and influential international peace conference to create conditions for the resumption of negotiations, and also make concrete efforts to help the peaceful coexistence of the two states, Israel and Palestine. And China is willing to play an active role in facilitating Palestinian reconciliation and advancing negotiations.
Our correspondent Feng Yilei in Beijing. The state funeral of the former Italian Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi is just coming to an end in Milan. These are the live pictures of the hearse and the cortege leaving the cathedral. Dignitaries and members of the public have been gathering at the city's ornate cathedral. This is the first time a national day of mourning has been declared for a former premier, a decision that's proved rather controversial, with a number of Italy's opposition politicians staying away from the funeral service. The former leader died on Monday at the age of 86. We'll stay on these pictures for a few moments and bring in the voice of our correspondent Alex Fraser, who's been watching the funeral in Milan. Alex, well, the final act, I suppose, of what's been a dramatic life.
Absolutely. It's been an incredibly public life that Mr. Berlusconi has lived. So just to take you through today's event, so around just over an hour and 20 minutes ago, Silvio Berlusconi's coffin arrived at the famous Duomo Cathedral in Milan. It made the journey, the hearse and group of other vehicles had made the journey from his residence in Arcore, just outside the city. When that hearse arrived and his coffin came out, the crowd, around 10,000 people in Piazza Duomo, the main square of Milan, all cheered. A group of football fans were there, Milan's Ultras, that's the AC Milan, the team that Mr. Berlusconi owned for 31 years. They all were chanting, "There's only one president." So here, the funeral's been very well received. Now, there were some protesters in the crowd. Someone had a banner that said, "Shame on this country," regarding this National Day of Mourning. It's rather controversial, and former Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte has chosen not to attend today. But in attendance, Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni and former Prime Minister Mario Draghi, along with a number of foreign dignitaries as well, such as Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, Albanian Prime Minister Edi Rama, and the Emir of Qatar. So a number of people here today, including representatives from the European Union and from many countries across the world.
Alex, what does Berlusconi's death mean for the Forza Italia party? And I wonder what impact might it have on Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni's coalition government?
It's particularly interesting because Forza Italia is entirely crafted in Berlusconi's reputation and image, and when there are elections here, it effectively says Berlusconi on the posters, no matter the candidates that are running. Now, the interesting thing is that, of course, without Mr. Berlusconi, that party loses a lot of its allure for various voters. So what could happen is voters may drift off to the other right-wing parties that are currently in the government coalition, as in Matteo Salvini's Lega, and of course Fratelli d'Italia, the Brothers of Italy, Giorgia Meloni's political party. But Forza Italia are in a very interesting position because they have the key lawmakers needed for a majority in Italy's Senate. So if there were a fallout or any fracturing of the party, that could have some impact on the government. Now, Mr. Berlusconi hasn't left a succession plan in terms of the party as such, or at least it's not public yet. So what we'll have to see is how those numbers will add up.
Alex, thank you for that.
More realistically, I think we'll see lawmakers go to...
Alex, thank you for that. Our correspondent Alex Fraser in Milan. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken will visit China this weekend. Ahead of that trip, he's been talking by phone with the Chinese Foreign Minister Qin Gang, who called on the United States to get relations back on track. The talks focused on Taiwan, with China urging the United States to respect China's sovereignty. Blinken stressed the need for communication to avoid conflict. Parts of India and Pakistan are beginning to experience strong winds and high tides a day before the expected landfall of Cyclone Biparjoy. Tens of thousands of people have been moved from coastal areas and offshore oil rigs. Fishing has been suspended in some areas, while schools and offices have closed. The storm is being blamed for 4 deaths so far, including 3 boys who drowned off the coast of Mumbai. And in the UK, Nottingham police are still questioning a man on suspicion of murder as they search for the motive for a stabbing and van attack which killed 3 people. The city has been mourning the victims, 2 university students returning from a party, Grace Kumar and Barnaby Webber. The 3rd victim has been named as Ian Coates, who was the school caretaker. And that is The World Today. Thank you for watching. We're back with more news at the top of this hour. Coming up next, it's World Inside. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.
Hello and welcome to the weather forecast. I'm Tierney. Well, over to Europe. Numerous amounts of precipitation are in store here for a vast majority of Europe from Thursday into Friday, and most of them will be in the form of some light to moderate intensity of rain with a potential thunderstorm as well. And about the business and travel for the major cities up in the north, and Stockholm and Helsinki will both see some overcast conditions in the morning hours on Friday with high temperatures in the upper 20s, and down in Minsk we'll see chance of showers with high temperatures touching the 30 degrees Celsius mark. And about the temperatures development over the next couple of days, and though there could see quite a lot of rain, temperature will still take an upward trend for a vast majority from Spain all the way towards into Russia from Thursday into Friday. And several locations will even see some above average high temperatures as we head into this weekend, so please be well prepared and try to stay cool as well. And here about the business and travel for the major cities across the western portion of Europe. Paris will be pretty hot with high temperatures above 30 degrees Celsius on Friday, and even hotter here down in Madrid with high temperatures of 33 degrees Celsius and overcast conditions as well. For other major cities across central portion of Europe, Friday, Berlin will see chance of showers with a high of 25 and overnight low temperatures about 11 degrees Celsius. And that is all from me. Stay tuned for more City Forecast.